Sudan, a nation in Northeast Africa, has been grappling with conflict and instability for decades. The reasons are complex and multifaceted. It's a volatile mix of ethnic tensions, power struggles, and economic inequalities. After years of dictatorship under Omar al-Bashir, hope flickered in 2019 when he was ousted. A transitional government promising peace and democracy took charge, but this fragile hope was brutally crushed in a 2021 coup. General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, head of the Sudanese armed forces, seized power. He partnered with General Mohamed Hamdan Dagalo, known as Hemeti, leader of the Rapid Support Forces. This uneasy alliance promised stability but delivered only a tense standoff. By early 2024, Sudan was a powder keg. The power-sharing agreement between Burhan and Hemeti, always fragile, began to crumble. The integration of the RSF into the army, a key point of contention, became a flashpoint. Each general commanding powerful and heavily armed forces eyed the other with suspicion. Beneath the surface, old rivalries and simmering tensions within the Sudanese populace threatened to erupt. The struggle for control, for the soul of Sudan, was a fight both generals were prepared to wage. The rivalry between the SAF and RSF is not a new phenomenon. It is rooted in Sudan's tumultuous history and the legacy of the Bashir regime. He deliberately played these forces against each other, ensuring his grip on power. The SAF, the official military of Sudan, is a large but conventionally structured force. It boasts air power and heavy weaponry. The RSF, on the other hand, evolved from the ruthless Janjaweed militias. They are notorious for their brutality in Darfur. Hemeti's forces are more mobile and adept at urban warfare, but lack the SAF's logistical depth. As January 2024 began, a sense of foreboding gripped Sudan. It was clear that the tenuous peace was about to shatter. The struggle for dominance between Burhan and Hemeti, played out in the corridors of power, was spilling onto the streets. The Sudanese people, weary of war and hopeful for a better future, once again braced themselves for the storm. The question was not if violence would erupt, but when and how devastating it would be. The year 2024 began with a glimmer of hope for Sudan. The international community, led by the United Nations and the African Union, pushed for a negotiated solution. The aim was to bring the military back into the fold of a civilian-led government. The talks were fragile, but they represented a chance, however slim, for peace. Yet even as diplomats negotiated, the situation on the ground deteriorated. The rivalry between the SAF and the RSF, simmering for months, began to boil over. On January 6th, a clash between SAF and RSF units in the city of El Obeid, North Kordofan, signaled the coming storm. What began as a localized confrontation quickly escalated. The incident underscored the deep mistrust and hostility between the two forces. Despite attempts at de-escalation, tensions continued to rise throughout January. Both sides reinforced their positions in key cities, including Khartoum and El Fasher. Rumors of an impending confrontation spread like wildfire, heightening the sense of dread among the populace. By the end of January, the fragile peace had completely unraveled. On January 30th, a large RSF convoy was seen moving towards Khartoum. This was a clear provocation. The SAF, interpreting it as a hostile maneuver, responded by putting its forces on high alert. The capital city, once bustling with life, became a ghost town as fear gripped its residents. Shops closed, streets emptied, and the specter of violence loomed large. The international community, caught off guard by the sudden deterioration, scrambled for a response. The UN called for restraint and urged both sides to return to the negotiating table. But the pleas fell on deaf ears. The momentum towards war had become unstoppable. Sudan, once on the cusp of a fragile peace, was now hurtling towards the abyss. February 2024 dawned with the deafening roar of gunfire in Khartoum. The uneasy peace had finally shattered. The capital became the main battleground in the power struggle between the SAF and the RSF. The fighting began in the early hours, engulfing the city in a maelstrom of violence. Heavy gunfire and explosions echoed through the streets, sowing terror among the trapped civilians. The SAF, leveraging its air power, targeted RSF positions across the city. Fighter jets screamed overhead, a terrifying reminder of the military's overwhelming firepower. The RSF, outgunned but not outmaneuvered, engaged in fierce street battles with the SAF. Their knowledge of the city and their mobility gave them a tactical advantage. Key strategic locations, including the airport, the presidential palace, and the state broadcaster's headquarters, became scenes of intense fighting. Control of these sites shifted back and forth, a testament to the ferocity of the fighting and the determination of both sides. The battle for Khartoum was not just about military objectives, it was about control of the narrative. As the fighting raged, the city descended into chaos. Hospitals, overwhelmed with the wounded and dying, struggled to cope with the influx. Electricity and water supplies were disrupted, plunging the city into darkness and exacerbating the humanitarian crisis. Food and essential supplies dwindled, forcing desperate residents to risk their lives searching for sustenance. The streets of Khartoum, once vibrant arteries of life, transformed into death traps. Snipers took up positions in tall buildings, their bullets claiming innocent lives. Roadblocks, manned by heavily armed fighters, sprung up across the city, restricting movement and instilling fear. The smell of gunpowder and fear hung heavy in the air, a suffocating reminder of the chaos and despair that had engulfed Khartoum. The city, once a symbol of hope for a united Sudan, was now a shattered testament to the savagery of war.